My son's wife called my retirement gift a joke in front of 40 people. She held it up at the dinner table, laughed, and said, "Seriously, is this what 30 years of scrubbing hospital floors looks like?" My son looked at his plate. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I picked up my purse and walked to my car in the rain. The next morning, I called my property manager. "Pull every lease under the Whitmore name," I said. "All of them." She went quiet for a second. "Evelyn," she said slowly, "that's the house on Birchwood. That's where your son lives." "I know exactly where it is," I said. "Pull the lease." Let me back up. Because this story doesn't start with that dinner. It starts 32 years ago in a hospital supply closet in Cincinnati, where I was mopping up a spill at 2 a.m. and a man in a $1,000 suit walked past me without making eye contact. Not rude exactly, just the way people look past a piece of furniture. I filed that away. Not with anger, with intention. My name is Evelyn. I'm 64 years old. I spent 28 years working nights at Mercy Regional, first as a custodial aide, then as a floor supervisor for the housekeeping department. I raised my son Caleb alone after his father left when Caleb was 3. We had a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Cincinnati, and I worked every extra shift I could find. What nobody knew, not Caleb, not my sister, not my closest friends, was what I did with the money after the rent was paid. The first property was a row house on Delmar Street, 1994. I paid $38,000 cash, money I'd been saving for 11 years. The plumbing needed work. I learned from library books. Both units were rented within 6 weeks to a nursing assistant who worked my same shift and a family I knew from church. I charged them below market rate. Still do. By 2008, I had 9 properties. By 2015, 23. By last year, 41. I still lived in the same apartment. $875 a month. Caleb thought I kept working nights because I couldn't afford to retire. I let him think that. I wanted to see who he'd become without the weight of money pressing on him. I wanted to know if he had values of his own. I found out at Easter dinner 2 years ago. He brought Brianna home for the first time at Christmas. She was pretty, polished, the kind of woman who used the word curated to describe her living room. Her family owned a landscaping company that had become a small empire, 3 counties, commercial contracts, the kind of money that shows. She was pleasant enough to me at Christmas, careful, the way people are careful with someone they've already decided doesn't matter. By Easter, she'd stopped being careful. That was the first time she made a comment about my hands. Caleb had gone to get more wine, and Brianna was looking at the centerpiece she brought, white tulips, very tasteful. And I was passing the rolls, and she looked at my knuckles and said, almost to herself, "Does the hospital have you in protective gloves? Your hands look like you've been working in a coal mine." I kept passing the rolls. I said nothing. I noted it. They got engaged in September. Brianna called me on a Tuesday morning, not to include me, to inform me. "We're thinking a destination wedding. Italy, probably. I'll have my coordinator reach out about logistics." The way she said coordinator, the way she said logistics. Caleb called that evening. He sounded happy, genuinely happy. I didn't tell him about Brianna's tone on the phone. I decided to wait. The retirement party was Caleb's idea. I'd put in my notice at Mercy Regional after 28 years, and he wanted to celebrate. We held it at his house, which is a colonial revival on Birchwood Lane in Hyde Park, one of the nicer neighborhoods in Cincinnati. 4 bedrooms, original hardwood, a back garden that Brianna had professionally landscaped. She'd shown me photos of the renovation at Christmas the year before. "We got an incredible deal on this house," she told me. "Almost criminal what the last tenant paid." I knew exactly what the last tenant paid. I owned the house. They'd moved in 18 months before through a property management company called Opal Holdings, LLC. My initials, my company, my manager, a woman named Frances who'd worked with me for 12 years, handled the paperwork. The rent was $3,200 a month. Fair for Hyde Park. Nothing extraordinary. Brianna had negotiated to her real estate agent and was very pleased with herself about it. She'd mentioned the landlord's company twice in conversation, always with a little smile like she'd outmaneuvered someone. She had no idea she was living in my house. At the retirement party, 40 people. Caleb's friends, some of my old coworkers, Brianna's parents and her sister. Brianna had done the decorating. Everything was tasteful and slightly cold like a showroom. After dinner, Caleb made a little speech. Something about sacrifice and hard work. Genuine, the way Caleb could be when Brianna wasn't directing the room. I felt a pull of love for him that I hadn't let myself feel in months. Then it was time for gifts. I prepared an envelope. Inside was a certified check drawn from one of my accounts. $85,000. Enough to pay off a significant piece of their mortgage and something I'd been setting aside for years specifically for this moment. I'd also written a letter. 2 pages, handwritten, about what I hoped for them, about what I'd learned about building something from nothing. Brianna opened it while Caleb was talking to someone across the room. She slid the check out, looked at it, and her face did something complicated. Then she held it up high enough that people nearby could see, and she laughed. 85,000? Her voice carried. Caleb, honey, come look. Your mom saved up $85,000. She said it the way you'd say, bless her heart, like I'd handed her a finger painting. Is this what 30 years of scrubbing hospital floors looks like? I thought retirement gifts were supposed to be symbolic. The room went uncertain. A few people laughed, nervous laughs, the kind that fill silence when nobody knows what else to do. Caleb was across the room. I watched him hear it. I watched him decide not to walk over. Brianna's mother touched my arm. It's very generous, Evelyn. She meant it. She looked embarrassed. I put my napkin on the table. I picked up my purse. I said goodnight to the people closest to me, not loudly, just a few words each, and I walked out. The rain had started while we were inside. I sat in my car for a moment, the engine not on. Rain on the windshield, the lit windows of the house I owned, glowing yellow against the dark. I didn't cry. I made a mental note. That was a Saturday in April. On Monday morning, I called my accountant, a man named Wesley who'd been managing my books for 15 years. I asked him to pull a complete picture of my current portfolio. 41 properties, estimated value $28.4 million. Rental income last year, $1.1 million. Rental income last year, $1.1 million. My personal accounts, separate from the properties, had accumulated through 3 decades of investing, another $6.2 million. Then I called Francis. Pull the lease on Birchwood Lane, I said, the Whitmore tenants, and pull their renewal timeline. Francis went quiet for just a moment. She'd never asked me personal questions in 12 years. She didn't start now. Their current lease expires in 90 days, she said. They've already indicated they want to renew. Send them the standard renewal notice and adjust the rate for current market. Francis paused. Current market in Hyde Park for a 4-bedroom colonial is around $4,800. That was a $1,600 increase. Send the notice, I said. The other thing I did on Monday was make an appointment with a private investigator named Ray Dillon. Ray had worked financial fraud investigations for the IRS for 20 years before going private. Francis had referred him to me 3 years ago when I had a tenant dispute involving forged income documents. He was thorough and he was quiet. I told Ray I needed background on Brianna Whitmore, née Haverford, specifically her business dealings. Her family's landscaping company had expanded quickly in the last 4 years. I wanted to know how. Ray called me back in 8 days. I met him at a coffee shop on Madison Road, the same kind of unremarkable corner place where nothing stands out. Ray looked like a retired accountant, which is what he was. He had a file folder and an almost empty cup of coffee. The landscaping company's growth is real, he said, but it's not entirely clean. He opened the folder. 3 county contracts in the last 4 years. The bids came in consistently lower than competitors by margins that don't make financial sense at their operating cost. He slid a document across the table. Her brother, Garrett Haverford, sits on the county parks advisory board. 2 of the 3 contracts ran through a subcommittee he chairs. The connection isn't disclosed anywhere in the public record. Bid rigging. Possibly bribery. Definitely a conflict of interest that someone with a government ethics office would want to see. Is there documentation? I asked. Enough to trigger an investigation, Ray said. Whether it goes further depends on what auditors find, but the pattern is there. I looked at the papers. Caleb's wife's family had built their comfortable empire, at least in part, on contracts that other honest businesses never had a fair shot at. People like me, people who'd submitted legitimate bids and lost, probably never knew why. I need everything copied and organized, I said. Already done. Ray pushed the full folder toward me. I picked up my coffee. It had gone cold. I drank it anyway. On the drive home, I thought about my son. Caleb didn't know about any of this. I was almost certain of that. He worked in urban planning, city permits. He had a meticulous sense of fairness about his work. Finding out his wife's family had potentially corrupted the exact kind of process he dedicated himself to would not sit easily with him, but he'd stood in his own house and let his wife hold up my gift like a punchline. I gave him 2 weeks. The renewal notice arrived at Birchwood Lane on a Thursday. Caleb called me Friday evening. He was careful, the way he got when he wanted to be diplomatic. Mom, we got the renewal notice from the landlord. The rate increase is pretty significant. Do you know anything about this rental market? Brianna's been trying to get in touch with the property company, and she's having trouble reaching anyone. I'd imagine the market has shifted, I said. It's a big jump. Properties in Hyde Park have appreciated considerably. He was quiet for a moment. I could hear him thinking. Are you okay, Mom? You left kind of suddenly at the party? I'm fine, Caleb. Brianna's joke wasn't, he started. She was trying to be funny. You know how she is. I do, I said. Good night, sweetheart. The call from Brianna came Tuesday. She didn't identify herself as calling about the lease. She called to apologize for the party, smoothly, with the confidence of someone who'd rehearsed the right amount of remorse. She said she'd had too much wine. She said she respected what I'd accomplished. She said she hoped I wasn't upset. I let her finish. Then I said, I appreciate that, Brianna. She pivoted seamlessly. I did want to mention, since we're talking, the renewal notice we got from Opal Holdings seems like it might have a mistake. The increase is quite steep. You could reach out to the management company directly, I said. I've tried. Their response time is a little slow. I wondered if you might know anyone over there, since you've been in Cincinnati so long. I paused just a beat. I'll look into it, I said. I did not look into it. 3 weeks after the renewal notice, I was having coffee at my kitchen table on a Tuesday morning when I made the decision I'd been circling. I picked up my phone and called Caleb. Not Brianna. Caleb. I'd like you to come over, I said. Just you. Saturday morning. He came at 10. He looked tired in the way that men look tired when they're managing something they don't fully understand. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped him with homework in 3rd grade, and I made us coffee, and I told him everything. The properties, starting with the row house on Delmar in 1994, the accumulation over 30 years, the portfolio value, the personal accounts, the way I'd structured it all under Opal Holdings, LLC. He sat very still. He didn't interrupt. Then I told him about Birchwood Lane. I watched his face change, slowly, like weather moving in. You own the house, he said. I've owned it for 7 years. You moved in 18 months ago. You knew when we signed the lease. Yes. He put his coffee cup down carefully. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to know who you were becoming, I said. I wanted to see if the values I tried to teach you were still there when you didn't know I was watching. He was quiet for a long time. Outside, a car passed on the street. The refrigerator hummed. What did you see? He asked. His voice was low. I saw a man who let his wife embarrass his mother in front of 40 people, I said, and looked at his plate. The silence after that was the hardest kind. Not angry, just open, raw. Caleb pressed his hands flat on the table. I should have said something? Yes, I didn't because she gets. He stopped. Started again. I tell myself it's just how she talks, that she doesn't mean it. But I knew how it landed. I knew. He looked at me. I'm sorry, Mom. That was a real failure on my part. Something in my chest shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a door that had been closed, opening just slightly. There's something else, I said. I put Ray's folder on the table. Caleb opened it slowly. He was a careful reader. He went through each document without speaking. By the third page, his jaw had set. By the fifth, he'd gone slightly pale. The Parks Board subcommittee, he said. He knew the exact implications. He worked in city planning. He knew exactly what this meant and how it worked. Her brother Garrett, I said. I've sat in rooms with Garrett. He closed the folder. Does Brianna know? I don't know. That's a question only she can answer. He sat with that for a moment. What did you do with this information? Nothing yet, I said. That decision is partly yours. He looked at me carefully. Partly, the people who lost those contracts submitted honest bids. They did the work and didn't get the job. That's not nothing. But Brianna is your wife. I held his gaze. So I'm telling you first. Caleb picked up his coffee cup, realized it was empty, set it down again. I need to talk to her. I know. And if she knew and she didn't tell me? I didn't answer that. Some questions a person has to answer for themselves. He left at noon. He called me Sunday evening 4 days later. She knew, he said. Not all of it, not the specifics, but she knew Garrett was steering the contracts. She said she thought it was just, his words, working relationships. She didn't want to look too closely. His voice was flat in the way that meant he was managing something large. I filed an anonymous disclosure with the county ethics office this morning. They'll investigate. I was quiet. I also told her about the house, he said. About Opal Holdings. How did she take it? She was angry. And then she was scared. And then she was scared. And then she cried. A pause. She's asking if you're going to evict us. I haven't decided what I'm doing with the property yet, I said. I have a development plan I've been considering for a while, converting several of my single-family holdings to multi-unit housing for working families, teachers, nurses, people who can't find anything affordable in Hyde Park. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Birchwood Lane? It's on the list. Another pause. Longer. Mom, are you doing this because of the party? I'm doing it because it's the right use of the property, I said. I've been thinking about this for 2 years. The party just clarified my timeline. We'd need to find somewhere to live. Yes, you would. I could hear him absorbing that. Then, quietly, okay. That was all he said. Just, okay. The county ethics investigation moved faster than I expected, possibly because Ray's documentation was so clean. 6 weeks after Caleb's disclosure, 2 investigators visited Garrett Haverford at the family's main office. The investigation became a matter of public record after that. Brianna's family hired attorneys. The 3 contracts were flagged for review. 2 competing companies were notified that their original bids would be reconsidered. Brianna called me once during this period. She was calm in the way that comes after the storm has already passed through a person. She didn't apologize for the party this time. She said, I think I owe you more than an apology, Evelyn. I don't know if I have the right words yet. You don't need to have them today, I said. Caleb is different than I understood, she said. It sounded like she was still working out what she meant by that. He filed that disclosure without asking me. I was angry. And then I realized that was the right thing to do, and I hadn't been willing to do it. I let her sit with that. I've been thinking about the kind of person I want to be, she said. I think I've been letting money be the measure. Does that make sense? It makes a great deal of sense, I said. Most people don't notice until something forces them to. Caleb and Brianna found a rental in Oakley, a smaller house, less prestigious street. It was a real adjustment for Brianna. She didn't pretend otherwise. But Caleb told me she'd started doing it without complaint and that she'd signed up to do bookkeeping, pro bono, for 2 nonprofits she'd previously had no time for. I noticed. The renovation on Birchwood Lane started in October. The colonial revival was converted into 4 units, 2-bedroom each, built to last. I priced them at $950 a month, well below market. Applications came from a home health aide who'd been on a wait list for affordable housing for 3 years, a first-grade teacher who was commuting 90 minutes each way because she couldn't afford to live in the district where she worked, a couple where both partners worked hospital housekeeping, the same job I'd done, and a young woman finishing her nursing degree who was sleeping on a friend's couch. I was there the morning the first tenants got their keys. I stood in the front yard in November cold with Francis, and we watched a woman named Angela, the home health aide, walk through the front door of her new apartment. She stopped just inside the threshold, hand on the doorframe, and just stood there for a second. Francis looked at me. I kept my eyes forward. On a Thursday in December, I drove to Caleb's place in Oakley, the first time I'd been there. It was smaller than Birchwood, a little worn at the edges, a house that needed some attention but had good bones. Brianna opened the door. She looked different, less assembled, more real. She'd cooked. An actual meal, not catered, nothing showy. She admitted twice that she'd looked up the recipe and it hadn't come out perfectly, and I told her it tasted fine, which it did. After dinner, the 3 of us sat at their kitchen table, and Caleb asked me, for the first time, to tell him about the properties. Not just the fact of them, the whole story. Delmar Street in 1994, the library books on plumbing, the second property, the third. I talked for a long time. He asked questions. Brianna was quiet at first, and then she started asking questions too. Careful ones. The kind that told me she was genuinely trying to understand something and not just waiting to respond. At the end of the evening, Caleb walked me to my car. It was cold, his breath visible in the porch light. "Did you ever think about telling me?" he asked. "Over the years. About the properties." "Every year," I said. "I always thought maybe next year when you're more settled. And then I thought, maybe I'm waiting because I want to see who you are without it." Both things were true. He nodded. "I'm glad you told me now." He paused. "Even if this wasn't the way I'd have chosen to find out." "Me either," I said. He hugged me on the sidewalk, the kind that held on for a second longer than necessary. I let it. Back in my apartment that night, I went to the small desk I've had for 30 years, and I opened the folder I keep at the back of the second drawer. Inside, 41 property deeds, organized alphabetically. My investment portfolio currently sitting at $6.2 million. A separate folder labeled simply Caleb, which contained the trust documentation I'd put together 4 years ago and updated last spring. The trust held $4.1 million, conservatively invested, designed so that he'd have access at 65, or earlier if specific conditions were met. Conditions I'd written myself. About character, about work, about what he did when he thought no one was watching. He'd made a serious mistake at that dinner. He knew it. He'd said so, and then, more importantly, he'd done something about it. He'd filed a disclosure that cost him something real, something he could have stayed comfortable and avoided. I picked up a pen and wrote a note on the inside cover of his folder. Not a formal amendment, just a note to myself. Something I'd tell Wesley to formalize. Conditions reviewed. Begin distribution access at his request. I put the pen down. The apartment was quiet. The radiator made its usual sound. Outside, the city hummed. I could move tomorrow. I have been able to for 20 years. I could live anywhere in Cincinnati, probably anywhere in the country, but I chose this apartment because it keeps me honest. Because it reminds me of what I built and why. Because the woman who bought a row house on Delmar Street with $38,000 she'd saved on a custodial aide salary still lives here, still matters. The $85,000 check, the one Brianna held up at the party, was deposited into my account the week after I left. It had never been cashed. I thought about what to do with it for a while. Eventually, I used it to cover the first year's operating shortfall on Birchwood Lane, subsidizing the 4 units until the building fund was self-sustaining. Brianna's joke became the down payment on 4 family stability. Not spite. Not revenge. Purpose. Those are different things, even when they come from the same wound. I still go to bed most nights before 10. I still wake up without an alarm at 5:30. I still make my coffee with the same $12 grocery store brand I've used for 30 years. Some habits are too old to break, and anyway, some things you keep not because you have to, but because they remind you what the work was for. People walk past working people every day without making eye contact. They always have. They probably always will. But the woman pushing the mop cart at 2 in the morning might own the floor beneath your feet. She might be building something you can't see from where you're standing. That's not a threat. It's just the truth. The work is always the gift. Everything else is what you do with it. I've been thinking about what actually happened that night at Caleb's house. The retirement party, the rain on my windshield afterward. And I keep coming back to one thing. Brianna didn't create the problem. She revealed it. There's a difference, and it took me a while to sit with that honestly. When she held up that check and laughed, she was doing what people do when they'd decided someone doesn't matter. She'd made that decision about me the first time she looked at my hands across a dinner table. The party was just the moment it came out in the open, and I think some part of me had been waiting for exactly that, not hoping for it, but knowing it was coming. You can feel it when someone has quietly categorized you. You don't always say so. You just note it and keep moving. What I want to say to anyone who's been in that room, the one where your worth gets casually dismissed in front of people you love, is this. The humiliation is real, but it's not information about you. It's information about them. The check didn't change in value because she laughed at it. The 30 years didn't mean less because she made a joke. Nothing about me changed in that room, only what she showed me about herself. I didn't plan what came next as revenge. I want to be clear about that because I think it matters. I pulled the lease on Birchwood Lane because I'd already been thinking for 2 years about converting those properties to affordable housing. The party didn't create the plan. It cleared away my hesitation. That's what a hard moment can do if you let it. It can make you stop waiting for the right time and just move. The harder truth I've had to face is about Caleb. He is my son, and I love him without condition. But he stood in his own house and let his wife use me as a punchline, and then he called it just how she talks. That's not a small thing. That's a choice. Every time someone allows a quiet cruelty to pass unchallenged, they are making a choice, and the choice compounds. He'd been making that choice for years. The ethics disclosure he filed, the honest conversation he had with Brianna after I showed him Ray's folder, those were also choices. Harder ones. Better ones. That's how character actually works. It's not fixed. It moves in both directions, depending on what you decide when it costs you something. Brianna is learning that too. Slowly. I believe she means it when she says she's thinking about who she wants to be. I'm watching, not with suspicion, with genuine interest, because the person who stood up to get a door open for her all her life, who used connections without questioning them, who measured other people by their zip code and their profession, that person can change. It requires honesty that's uncomfortable to sustain. But it's possible. What I keep returning to is this. The work was never invisible. It just wasn't seen by people who weren't looking. That's their limitation, not mine. I mopped floors at 2 in the morning and I came home and I studied property tax records and I saved and I built and I did it all without asking anyone's permission or approval. That life is the thing I'm proudest of. Not the portfolio, not the numbers. The fact that I showed up year after year without recognition and I kept going anyway. That's the only lesson I know how to offer. Not every story ends with a dramatic moment of justice. Most of them end with a Tuesday, with a cup of coffee, with the quiet satisfaction of knowing you did honest work and it meant something. The rest tends to take care of itself.